everyone, welcome to another video at the Paper Addict. This one is going to be a little bit different for me as it is mixed media. Not too much, but just a little. I start with a smooth piece of Recollections cardstock, and I just used that because I don't have any smooth cardstock, and when I went to Michael's it was the only sheet they had. Not just the only brand they had, the only sheet of white smooth cardstock they had. So I'm just putting some Liquitex gesso on there. It was a brand new bottle. I'm going to be using 3 photos on this layout. Here's a sketch from paper issues that I'm using, and I turned it. So just so I know where I want my mixed media to be, I put 4 little dots at the edges of my photo using Heidi Swap, I think it's just pink, Color Shine. I think I would water this down a little bit next time so it moved a little better, but you know, you learn these things as you go. So I just want it peeking out from the top and bottom of where I'm going to place my photos. I did get some down in the bottom that I didn't want there. So what I end up doing off camera is I just cover it with a little bit more gesso, and that fades it right out. So I'm using an older collection from My Creative Scrapbook. It had the Doodlebug's Sweetest Thing line in it. And I want to use this paper as my base paper, but I realize it's too short, so I'm going to think on that for a little while. And now I'm just going to start building my layers. You see I have that paper bag that I really wanted to use, and you'll see I try to get it on that page every which way, but it never makes it. So I'm going to back my photo with this stripy paper. It's the only way to describe it. However, the lines are not perfectly straight, they're wavy. So rather than use those as a guide and end up possibly being crooked, I do cut this to size rather than just wing it. And I always start out bigger than I think I need. I can't ever decide if I want a 1/4 inch border or an 1/8 of an inch border. So I always start with a 1/4, and then I can always cut it down later. So here again, I'm trying to get that paper bag on there. I don't know what it is about it. I think it was that it was white, and it was so large that that's why it kept throwing me off. You couldn't really see the heart, so all you saw was this big, large white blob on the white cardstock. But you'll see right up until the end, I try to get it on there. You'll have to forgive me. I have a little bit of a I don't know what going on, so my voice is a little scratchy. I wake up like this, and then by the end of the day I'm fine, and then I wake up like it again. So annoying. But now I'm just picking through the papers, seeing which ones look right with the photos. This is my sister's wedding, and that is her wedding cake. And then the 2 photos I'm going to use with it are them, you know, giving each other their cake. So I thought I wanted to use this P.S. I Love You little cut apart to bring in more gray to make that stand out a little more. I even tried trimming it down, but it's just too bulky. It just looks heavy where it is. So I go with a lighter one. I think it says You're So Sweet or something like that, which obviously applies to both the wedding and the cake. So I decide I want to use that pink paper somewhere in there, and it's pink with like scattered hearts. But again, that bag keeps throwing me off. And then I think, okay, maybe this gray with hearts, but you don't really see the hearts. So I hem around and keep pulling out all these different papers. And I don't know what it is for me, but why do they have to be so busy? I love the colors, but each sheet was super, super, super busy. And you'll see me later when I cut a piece of that pink paper and look to see what was on the back. I'll hold it up for you. It's probably coming up in just a second. And kind of give you the what the heck hands. Like, what do elephants have to do with love? Why are those even a thing with a love collection? But I'm pretty, if you've watched my videos before, you know I'm not one to use, say cactus on a winter page or, llamas on something that doesn't have to do with the zoo. So I'm pretty literal that way. And there again, that darn paper bag. I think this is where I kind of abandon it and say, no more paper bag. And I wanted to, again, bring in more gray, but it was just too heavy on the page. It gave it a different feel than I wanted. I wanted the mixed media to just be peeking out and it be more light and airy. So I decided to just use little pops of other papers rather than a big solid piece. That was a 2x2 card, and I end up liking that pattern, so I pull out this 4x6 pocket page card and end up letting that peek out from the left corner, and then that strip that I cut off when I backed my photo goes up at the top, and it just gives enough definition between the pink paper and the mixed media. So now work it all by background again. I come back to that paper that's too short, and I do come up with an idea for that. So the first thing I do is back my mixed media page with a piece of black cardstock. It gave enough of a definition between the white and the pink. It toned it down a little. The white seemed really harsh against the pink. And I do use a ton of adhesive on this because it was, with the mixed media, just a little bit warped, and I didn't want to risk it coming off the page. Normally I would have cut the center out of that black cardstock, but I wanted the strength. So now I'm going to go get a piece of cardstock that I've had in my stash forever, and I'm not fond of the color. And if I've had it this long and haven't used it, it can go to use here. Get it out of my stash, and I'm going to cheat. I'm going to, piece together a border with just using strips around the edges. And you really can't see once the layout is done, since I'm using just a tiny border, the corners where they overlap really aren't noticeable. Again, a ton of adhesive and a full piece of cardstock, and this layout is hardly warped at all then. So now I'm just going to start adhering my pieces down. Realize I didn't tuck that in, so I have to pull it back up. And I was surprised the ATG stuck to the mixed media pretty well. I've heard about people having trouble getting their glues to stick to the gesso, but this worked actually pretty well. And now I'm going to move on to embellishing. And this is where my design team work at the Southern Girls Challenge comes in, where we were asked to use any type of circle embellishment on our project. So these are buttons I had in my stash, the wooden buttons. They're from Chamel. I have 2 of them with hearts, so they were appropriate for my theme. And you'll see me, I'll move them around a few times before deciding on where they're going to end up. The other thing is, I believe it was Lasting Memories wanted you to use the title Happy. So I have that little um, bauble there, looks like an ornament to me, that says Happy. But I wanted to add those other two photos to make this a flip open before I attached my embellishments, and I was out of flip flaps from Simple Stories. So I'm making my own with a 6x8 pocket protector that had two 4x6 photos. I just cut off the part where it would go into an album, the punched holes, and then I cut them apart, and it fit, obviously the photo fits perfectly. So I want something really strong and clear to adhere these down with. So I go and find my Sookwang tape. If that's strong enough for mini albums that are going to get moved and pages turned and used, I figured it would be strong enough for this since it was attaching to the paper layers and not the mixed media layer. And it would also be clear enough that it wouldn't be an eyesore on the page. So I made sure to burnish it down, and then I was ready to go. And I could start gluing down my embellishments. But when I flipped those open, I realized how unsightly just the back of the photo was. And these were the only photos I had of this time in their reception, so I just backed them with some of the patterned paper, which actually worked well because it gives my sister a spot to write something without it being on the page where people could read it or trying to write on top of the mixed media. It also allowed me to put that heart paper, the gray heart paper that I loved so much, somewhere without it overwhelming the page, so that made me a little bit happy too. And then I realized, okay, there needs to be at least a little something on the flippy parts, or the flip flaps when you open them. So I glue my button down so that can, start drying. I use my best glue ever because I know it will be strong enough to keep those buttons there with the movement of the flaps. I had a few more splatters in the corners just to give it a little, I don't know, it just needed some darker pieces of that color. When I had blotted it up with my tissue, there wasn't as much, I guess, definition and color as I would have liked, so I added some. So I add some hearts from the sticker sheet to match the hearts in my wood buttons. I grab one puffy one just for the dimension so that the wood buttons aren't the only dimension. And then I'm going to add my stickers to the flaps. I decided just to use tiny word stickers on the inside so there wouldn't be any additional bulk or anything damaging the photos. Once this goes in an album, it has other pieces on top of it pushing down. So on the top here I use a tiny word sticker, and then I pull out my pink basket of enamel dots and stickles and brads. So I go with a tiny puffy heart to match the puffy I put in the left corner, and then I pull out some really old Doodlebug boutique brads to try to get those used up and out of my stash. And I just use wire cutters to get the backs off the brads because I don't like to use them as actual brads. And I just use a half of a pop dot to secure that down, and then I call my layout done. Thanks for watching this slightly mixed media layout with me. I'd love it if you'd hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.